Our world is built on secrets. Some are carved in stone, others lie hidden deep below us, and a few are just waiting for the right moment to scream, "You had it all wrong." We're talking about Viking Age warriors wielding swords made of metal that defy explanation. The Ulfbert swords were made between about 800 and 1000 AD, so right solid in the High Viking period. A labyrinth so ancient and eerie, its purpose has been lost to time. These aren't myths, they are real discoveries that are forcing us to tear up the history books and start over. In this video, we're digging up the unbelievable. Join us as we unveil ancient shocking finds that rewrite history. The impossible warrior's sword. Archaeologists working in Germany have made an impressive discovery. While excavating in a Bavarian town called Nordlingen, they found an exceptionally well-preserved sword. So well preserved, it almost still shines, which is remarkable because it's more than 3,000 years old. In 2022, archaeologists excavating a burial site in Nordlingen, Bavaria, uncovered something extraordinary, a bronze sword that is more than 3,000 years old, and yet shines as if it had just been forged. Unlike most weapons from the Bronze Age, which survive in fragments or heavy corrosion, this blade was remarkably preserved, its surface gleaming and its edges intact. The weapon is large, heavy, and expertly crafted. Clearly not a tool for farm work, but a weapon designed for status and power. The most striking feature of the sword is its octagonal hilt, a rare and technically demanding design. Only a handful of smiths in Bronze Age Germany or Denmark could have produced such a piece, because the shaping of bronze into that form required advanced skill. In societies of that era, metalworkers held unique authority, often regarded as near-magical figures, because they could transform raw ore into weapons and tools that defined survival and warfare. To own such a sword was not only to wield a weapon, but to carry a symbol of extraordinary wealth and influence. What puzzled researchers was the blade's condition. It is balanced and perfectly capable of use in combat, yet it shows almost no wear. There are no nicks or dents along the edges, no signs of repeated blows or sharpening. For a sword that could have been deadly in battle, its near pristine state raises questions. Was it never used in a fight? Was it reserved only for display or ceremony? The context of its burial adds to the mystery. The sword was found alongside the remains of 3 individuals, a man, a woman, and a child. Archaeologists believe this grouping hints at social status. They may have been members of one household or individuals chosen to accompany the weapon's owner into the afterlife. Whatever the exact relationship, the burial suggests the sword was not merely a tool, but a symbol tied to identity, rank, and prestige. To understand its potential, researchers created replicas of the blade and tested them in controlled combat experiments. The results showed that the sword could inflict serious damage. It was not a ceremonial fake, but a fully functional weapon. Yet the contradiction remains. If it could fight, why was it never used? The most likely explanation is that this was a prestige object, meant less for war than for display of power, a status marker, a trophy, or perhaps a ritual object tied to leadership and authority. The discovery of this sword in Bavaria reshapes how historians think about the Bronze Age in Central Europe. It shows that even 3,000 years ago, craftsmanship and symbolism mattered as much as function. The sword was more than a weapon. It was a statement of wealth, a demonstration of rare skill, and a reminder that power was not only about battle, but also about the image of strength. Dionysian frescoes at Pompeii. In 2023, archaeologists in Pompeii's Reggio Fifth district uncovered new frescoes inside the house of the Thalius. These paintings are more than decoration. They appear to show secret initiation rituals linked to the cult of Dionysius, the ancient god of wine, fertility, and religious ecstasy. The discovery is significant because only one other large fresco in Pompeii, the one in the Villa of the Mysteries, shows similar rites. This makes the new find extremely rare and important. The paintings are large, detailed, and dramatic. They stretch across 3 panels on deep red walls. The figures are nearly life-size, and they show women caught in the middle of ritual activity. One bites into raw meat. Others carry dead animals on their shoulders. Some dance while satyrs, half-man and half-goat creatures, play musical instruments beside them. At the center, a clothed woman stands still. She appears hesitant, as if she is about to be drawn into the ritual. The scene is direct and unsettling because it shows violence, food, music, and movement all at once. Archaeologists describe the paintings as a megalography, which means a large fresco designed to be read as a story. These are not random images. They were made to show the steps of an initiation ceremony.
The combination of hunting, slaughter, and dance suggests that the cult's followers used shocking displays to create powerful emotional effects. Some scholars believe that wine or drugs may have been used to push participants into a trance-like state. Whether or not that is true, the fresco shows that this was a ritual designed to change someone's identity, marking their passage from outsider to insider. The implications are serious. Roman politicians and writers often accused the Dionysian cults of being dangerous. They said the rites encouraged excess, broke social rules, and threatened order in Roman society. For centuries, we only had those outsider accounts. Now, with this fresco, we have a direct view of what participants actually saw. The painting shows discipline and structure, not random chaos. It proves that these rites existed inside private spaces in Pompeii, even though the Roman state tried to ban them. The fresco was preserved by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE. Today, it gives historians rare evidence of how people practiced religion outside official temples. It shows that under Rome's strict laws, private groups still gathered, still performed their secret ceremonies, and still found meaning in rituals that mixed fear, violence, and devotion. Tomb of Thutmose II. For 100 years, the story of Egypt's royal burials seemed complete. Since the dazzling discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, the Valley of the Kings had given up no new pharaohs. That is, until now. In February 2025, archaeologists made a historic find: the first burial of an ancient Egyptian king discovered since Tut, belonging to the powerful pharaoh Thutmose II. But this tomb is unlike any other, and its secrets are only beginning to unravel. The first great puzzle is its location. Instead of being nestled in the famous Valley of the Kings with other great rulers, Thutmose II's final resting place is isolated, over a mile away on its own. Why was he sent into this lonely exile in death? The second mystery is the tomb itself. It's empty. Shortly after his burial around 3,500 years ago, a flood rushed through the chamber. Ancient priests, acting to protect their king, bravely entered the damaged tomb. They rescued the pharaoh's mummy and his most precious treasures, moving them to a safer, secret location. All they left behind were a few heavy items, including one crucial clue: a large jar made of beautiful alabaster stone. This jar carries an inscription that solves one riddle but creates another. It tells us that the burial was ordered by Thutmose II's wife, who was also his half-sister, Hatshepsut. She would later become a powerful pharaoh in her own right and would choose to be buried in the Valley of the Kings. So why did she bury her husband so far away? Was it her choice or his? This leads to the most puzzling question of all. The archaeologists have their eyes on a giant pile of rubble near the empty tomb. They suspect it might not be just a pile of rocks. It could be a hidden second tomb, a secret chamber where the priests moved Thutmose II's body. If they are right, this second tomb could be untouched, holding the pharaoh's mummy and all his riches, waiting in the dark for over 3 millennia. The empty tomb is just the beginning. It's a ghost story from the ancient world, a crime scene with a missing body, and a treasure hunt all rolled into one. The search for the lost pharaoh is on. Cambodia's ancient turtle. At first glance, it was just a stone turtle, half buried for centuries, where water once sat in Angkor's ancient reservoir, Shra Shrang. But this statue, dating back to the 10th century, was about to reveal an incredible secret. When archaeologists tapped on its shell, a hairline crack appeared, developing into a perfect little rectangle. This was no ordinary statue. It was a container. With painstaking care, the team inserted a sharp blade into the crack, carefully working it around the edges to loosen the lid. They opened the stone creature like a box, revealing a large, rectangular, hollow interior. Within this chamber was a strange gel-like substance, reminiscent of wet silica gel. You can see in the footage how archaeologists gently took a small sample, trying to decipher its ancient recipe. What was this mysterious gel, and why was it sealed inside a stone turtle buried under a temple? Experts confirm it is at least 1,000 years old, a silent message from the past. The turtle itself, measuring about 36 by 93 centimeters, is a powerful symbol. In the Hindu myths that shaped Angkor, turtles represent longevity and stability. Finding it under a temple is classic.
Builders often buried sacred objects to bless the ground and ward off evil, but this find was particularly special. Removing it was a delicate operation. The animal's bottom half was still stuck in the earth, and the crew had to wrap the fragile statue and probe the surrounding mud to avoid causing any cracks. This turtle was not alone. The dig also yielded 2 metal tridents, ritual objects linked to Hindu gods, and the carved head of a mythical creature, all pointing to a rich ceremonial life at the site. For a place like Angkor, a World Heritage Site, these small finds sharpen the picture of everyday belief. A temple is more than architecture. It's a place where symbols hold power. So, the turtle is far more than an old stone. It is a carefully placed charm, a vessel holding a mysterious offering. The gel inside adds a new layer of intrigue to the ritual. It's a whisper from a builder who carved a creature of stone to hold time steady, a quiet hope for protection that still speaks across a millennium. Roman Basilica in London. What looks like office foundations turned into an ancient city's civic heart. Beneath the basement of an office block at 85 Gracechurch Street, archaeologists uncovered a large section of Londinium's first basilica. The dig exposed massive limestone walls that once supported a structure about 40 meters long, 20 meters wide, and roughly 12 meters high, a place large enough to hold court, markets, and public gatherings. The find came during early work to demolish and redevelop the site. After several small test pits between filing cabinets, the team struck a huge chunk of Roman masonry. On the third attempt, the limestone blocks quarried from Kent showed careful work and organization. Roof tiles stamped with an official's mark give a human touch. A business card from the distant past. Those small items help date the structure to around 70 to 80 CE, a few decades after the Romans founded Londinium. The basilica sat inside the forum, the civic hub that included a courtyard roughly the size of a football pitch, and shops around the edges. In those years, the Forum and Basilica were the center of urban life. People came to argue cases, make deals, and collect decisions that affected the town and beyond. For the first generation of Roman Londoners, this was where the laws were read, markets opened, and power was visibly administered. That first Forum and Basilica were used for a short span, perhaps only 20 years, before being replaced by a larger complex, a sign of how fast the city grew. The recent discovery fills in a missing chapter. It shows how quickly Londinium moved from a new outpost into an organized center of trade and government. The modern reaction has been practical and dramatic. Developers revised their plans to protect the ruins. Architects shifted column positions, reduced lift shafts, and lowered building height so the remains could be conserved and viewed. The site will be open to the public, folding a Roman court back into the rhythms of the modern city. The basilica reminds viewers that cities are layered things, where each generation builds above the bones of the last. And sometimes construction reveals a past that changes how we understand a city's birth and early life. The decision to integrate archaeology into new design turns redevelopment into a public reveal, a commute made museum-like. Visitors will walk from modern hallways down to Roman stones, bridging 2 millennia in one step and one roofline, and change how people view London. Ancient Peruvian pyramid with fire altar. Thousands of years ago, in the dry valleys north of Lima, a small city did something big. At Acierao, part of the Great Corral Network, archaeologists found a round fire altar that rewrites how people picture early Andean life. This thing is 5,000 years old. It's circular, about 7 meters across, reached by a staircase from a ceremonial hall, and it opens onto a rectangular patio that measures 16 by 8 meters. Those are not the marks of a casual hearth. This is a stage, a sacred stage for elite ritual. What makes the find stick in the mind is how clearly it speaks of exclusivity. According to the team, only certain religious and social leaders could go near these altars. People tossed in offerings, quartz fragments, shells and fish bits, beads, and crops grown nearby. Some of those items were burned. The smoke and flame were not mere cooking. They were part of a public show of power and belief. The way the altar sits beside the major pyramidal building, labeled C1, tells a story about authority. The leaders used ritual to hold people together, to show who mattered and why. Corral, or Norte Chico, is already famous for flipping assumptions about when complex societies arose in the Americas. Monumental pyramids, planned irrigation, and wide trade ties existed here 5,000 years ago, long before most civilizations in the region. Erabit de Pondo spreads across 57 hectares and holds 48 structures, temples, pyramids, and elite homes. Its position, about 12.5 kilometers from the sea, placed it where coastal resources met inland farms. That mix made it powerful without obvious reliance on war. Instead, ideology, public ritual, and shared ceremonies seem to do much of the heavy lifting. Finding a formal fire altar like this is valuable because it gives detail to big-picture ideas. It shows how leaders performed authority, how ritual technology worked, and how communities used flame and smoke as social tools. It also changes how Herediano is seen inside the Corral network, not a backwater, but a player with its own sacred center and public stage. For storytellers and filmmakers, the image is strong and simple: a stone stair, a round altar rimmed by smoke, offerings placed and then consumed by fire, an audience watching as power is made visible. It's a reminder that ancient people used ceremonies like a language, and sometimes, when the language is loud enough, it reshapes whole societies. That mix made it powerful without obvious reliance on war. Instead, ideology, public ritual, and shared ceremonies seem to do much of the heavy lifting. Finding a formal fire altar like this is valuable because it gives detail to big-picture ideas. It shows how leaders performed authority, how ritual technology worked, and how communities used flame and smoke as social tools. It also changes how Arredondo is seen inside the corral network. Not a backwater, but a player with its own sacred center and public stage. For storytellers and filmmakers, the image is strong and simple. A stone stair, a round altar rimmed by smoke, offerings placed and then consumed by fire, an audience watching as power is made visible. It's a reminder that ancient peoples used ceremonies like a language, and sometimes, when the language is loud enough, it reshapes whole societies. A cannibal massacre. Under a quiet field in Somerset, a dark hole keeps a secret that turns ordinary history into horror. Archaeologists opened a shaft nearly 50 feet deep and found more than 3,000 bone fragments from at least 37 people, men, women, and children. This was not a tidy cemetery. The bones were broken, cut, and burned. Skulls showed blunt force trauma. Other bones had clean, intentional cuts. The working conclusion: this was a massacre, not a battle. What makes the site worse is what the marks suggest. The bodies we butchered, flesh stripped, bones processed. That pattern points to cannibalism, or at least treatment of bodies that goes beyond mere disposal. Early investigators checked for famine or ritual. Nearby cattle bones showed there had been food in the area. If people were eating other people while cattle lay available, the motive probably wasn't hunger. The act read instead as a form of terror, a way to break a group and leave a message to others. This is what happens to those who stand in the way. The shaft's context matters. This was Bronze Age Britain, small communities, seasonal work, tight social ties. There's no sign of a pitched field battle or lines of armed men. The evidence points to ambush, capture, and deliberate mutilation. That suggests a planned attack designed to humiliate or dominate, not merely to kill. The victims' ages and sexes show that an entire community was targeted. Children weren't spared. New tools help reveal the scene. Soil analysis, microscopic study of cut marks, and careful mapping turned a hole in a field into a record of violence. Each cut and fracture tells a human story. Someone swung a tool, someone else held, and another screamed. The hole became a permanent warning, buried deep and dark. These finds force a hard truth. Prehistoric communities could be violent in ways that still shock. The Somerset shaft is not only about gore. It updates our understanding of social life in the past. It shows that power can express itself not just through leaders and monuments, but through terror and total annihilation. Prison bakery found at Pompeii. Under Vesuvius ash, archaeologists opened a small, cramped bakery that reads more like a holding pen than a workplace. This space was found in Region 9, Insula 10, inside a house that shows two lives at once. A richly decorated residential wing with fourth-style fresco, and a back area devoted to production. The workshop is narrow, with high windows set under iron bars and no real view of the street. The only exit led into the house's atrium, not the outside world. That layout says something blunt about control. Carved into volcanic basalt around the millstones are semicircle grooves. These were not decorations. They are the curva canalis that guided the hooves and steps of draft animals so the stones could grind grain without slipping. The grooves trace a steady circular route around four tightly packed millstones. A long feeding trough marks the attached stable.
Picture donkeys walking the same slow circle, urged along as a slave added grain and checked the flour. 3 people were found in the bakery rooms in recent months. Their presence confirms that the place was lived in and worked up to the eruption. This is not an empty workshop preserved by chance. It is evidence of bodies kept out of sight. The high barred windows and lack of direct street access made it easy for an owner to restrict movement. That arrangement fits the harsh lines of Roman servitude, where many workers had little room beyond their assigned tasks. Ancient writers like Apuleius describe similar mills. His tale of Lucius turned into a donkey reads less like a fantasy and more like a glimpse into daily reality. The archaeological detail adds to that picture. Grooves to prevent slipping, a compact group of millstones.
The stable next door matches the scenes in old texts and in reliefs that show millers and animals working together as a single machine. Animal, slave, stone. Director Gabriel Tucktrill called the find a revealing and troubling sight of ancient slavery, a place without trust or hope of release. The bakery is simple, mundane even, yet its routine was brutal. The bread was ordinary, the work behind it was not. For visitors, the image that lingers is small and cruel. A stone circle worn smooth by hooves, a barred high window letting in a thin strip of light, and hands and feet that turned the same labor into daily bread. The bakery makes history less grand and more human, and harder to look away from. Lost Sumerian Palace, Girsu, Tello. When British and Iraqi teams started digging at Tello, the site had a long, messy life behind it. A discovery more than a century ago, looting and layers of time. Then mud brick walls appeared, the kind of walls that say palace rather than house. This palace belongs to Girsu, a city that thrived roughly 4,500 years ago, a place where writing, law, and city life were being shaped. The claim that a palace sat here drew skepticism at first. When project leader Dr. Sebastian Ray suggested it, some peers doubted the idea and questioned the use of funds. The dig answered with substance. Alongside the walls came more than 200 cuneiform tablets, clay records listing deliveries, names, taxes, and orders. Those tablets are like inboxes from 2500 BCE, dry, blunt, and full of everyday detail. Open them, and people from millennia back start speaking in small, clear acts. A main temple to Ninjirasu also surfaced, confirming a location known only from scattered inscriptions until now. This matters. Temples and palaces together show how power, worship, and administration fit in one city. They let the past stop being a handful of isolated items and become a functioning place with officials, rituals, and schedules. The project is built on cooperation. The British Museum and the Getty supported the work, while Iraqi archaeologists and students were trained in the field. Since 2015, more than 70 Iraqis have gained skills to run digs and preserve finds. Some fragile brickwork was lifted and taken to the Iraq Museum in Baghdad for safekeeping. That effort, training, preservation, shared control, is part of the discovery's real story. Experts reacted with awe. The director of the British Museum called Girsu one of the most fascinating sites visited. The Getty's director highlighted how important and yet little-known Girsu is. Those responses point to a larger truth. A single city in southern Iraq can change big-picture ideas about the dawn of urban life. The 2 lost coins. In the middle of English farmland, 2 small objects emerged that do not belong to the usual story of Britain's past. Archaeologists uncovered 2 Chinese coins, nearly 1,000 years old, dating from the northern Sung dynasty. One turned up in Cheshire, the other in Hampshire. The locations were not close. Yet both finds came from medieval soil layers that also contained European material. The appearance of Chinese money in medieval England immediately raised questions. The simplest explanation is that the coins were lost in recent times. Victorian collectors were fascinated by foreign objects and sometimes carried them as curiosities. A farmer or drover could have dropped them in a field by chance. That theory would neatly dismiss the puzzle,
But in this case, the context was more complicated. The coins were not isolated. They were found alongside medieval weights, Roman coins, imported pottery, and other trading equipment. One coin was discovered directly next to items linked to medieval commerce. This made the collector's accident theory much harder to accept. Dr. Caitlin Green of Cambridge University argues that these finds may point to broader connections than historians once assumed. The Middle Ages were not as closed off as popular imagination suggests. Traders, envoys, and travelers did move across borders, and there are scattered records that hint at surprising contacts. English names appear in Mongol records. Letters from European rulers made their way east. Envoys crossed the Channel and beyond. While those documents do not directly mention coins, they show that ideas, goods, and people could travel far greater distances than maps usually indicate. The presence of the Song dynasty coins in England suggests several possible routes. A merchant trading in silk or porcelain might have received coins as part of a transaction and kept one as a charm or souvenir. A diplomat could have been given a coin as a token during a meeting and carried it back across continents. A traveler returning from Asia might have tucked a coin into a pouch as a keepsake, only for it to be lost centuries later in English soil. Each of these scenarios implies movement, exchange, and human contact across enormous distances. The coins do not give clear answers, but they raise important questions.
Did they arrive with a single traveler who made an unusual journey, or do they point to steady exchanges between Europe and Asia that history has overlooked? Could their presence still be coincidence, made more striking by the items found around them? Whatever the truth, these small coins show that history is not fixed. Even a single coin in the soil can reveal that the medieval world was more connected than we once believed.